So my first guest of 2026. So it's the first one I'm doing. I don't know about you, Ben, but Ben Veal from Wrestling Life Online. We spoke last night and today, Ben. And I just want to say this is a very big honor of having you on because I'm a massive fan of your content, and it's just time the stars have aligned and you're finally here. So thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Nice to be your first guest of 2026.
Literally the first. As we were
I,
mentioning, sorry, you first, man.
I was just going to say, I've recorded a few already. I had a break over Christmas, but January has been a busy one. I think I've done 4 Wrestling Life interviews so far this year. Packing them in.
Yeah. So when you're doing your wrestling life online, like how do you like to do you like to do a guest and then like do you have a set times that you want to like release them? Like say for example Friday at 6 o'clock.
They go out on Mondays, Mondays in the afternoon.
Okay.
So yeah, let's say it lands around lunchtime in the States and the afternoon in the US. And every week we go out with a new episode on a Monday.
Okay. Decent man. So who have you got coming up that you might not have announced yet or like said or can you do that?
Well, next week is Demolition. So Demolition are entering the Wrestling Life Hall of Fame. So I recorded a very special episode with Axe and Smash, Bill Eadie and Barry Darso just a couple of days ago. So that one airs, I'm not sure when this goes out, but that one airs on the 20th of January.
Okay. So you mentioned there obviously the Wrestling Life Hall of Fame. Like
Yep.
how did that idea come about?
It came about really because I think there's a huge amount of people that should be in the WWE Hall of Fame that aren't in there. And I've got a platform, and halls of fame have to start from somewhere, don't they? At the end of the day, a hall of fame isn't actually a physical construct. The WWE Hall of Fame doesn't actually exist, nor does the TNA Hall of Fame or any of these really. So I thought, why not start one? I've got a digital platform in Wrestling Life. I'm a lifelong wrestling fan. I have, so much respect for these incredible performers, and let's create a space for some unsung heroes. The first inductee was a British Bulldog, Davy Boy Smith. Now, Davy Boy obviously had gone into the WWE Hall of Fame, but if you remember, his induction was during 2020, so he never really got that opportunity to, his family never really got the opportunity to do it to a big audience.
Yeah.
Everyone else that was inducted last year haven't been inducted into a Hall of Fame. So I have Mike Yoda, Dynamite Kid, Tom Billington, Candice Michelle, Marc Mero, and Buff Bagwell were 2025's inductees, and we've got an even bigger class going in this year.
Wow. And it's just incredible that you are doing that. And it's, I seem to find that different podcasts, like do different things. So I've got one friend who I know that does like charity work and like looks at what wrestlers do for that. Yours is obviously like different. You do a little bit of everything. Like obviously you talk about them, you talk about their life, but then you also like celebrate their life with being a professional wrestler and dedicating that to them. So this whole thing that you do and you are doing is really good.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the idea of the show really is trying to give an idea of who these people are away from a wrestling ring. So this kind of whole tagline I have of real talk from real talent. It's all about who are these people that we've cheered for decades? Who are they in real life? So looking at kind of the mental health struggles, whether it's kind of nutrition, whether it's family life and everything, their hobbies away from a ring. It's kind of exploring that side. But then, of course, because I've loved wrestling for 35 years, I have to ask them some of the questions about some of their big moments as well. But what I find is by starting the conversation off in a different way, you get into a nice flow with the guest. And then by the time you are asking them to remember a Royal Rumble or a WrestleMania or whatever it may be, you've kind of broken the barriers a little bit, and they've got to know you. So I've really worked hard at trying to build relationships with guests, and remembering that all of these wrestlers are people first. And I think that's sometimes something we can forget as wrestling fans, that these are real human beings doing a very, very intense job. And I'm particularly fascinated about speaking with people from the 80s and 90s who were doing 310 320 days a year on the road, traveling everywhere.
Mm.
And so many of them ended up having broken families and very difficult relationship with their kids and being estranged from partners and all that kind of stuff, because it's just the kind of lifestyle you can't imagine. So I find it fascinating to speak to those guys, and my only regret is I didn't start doing this sooner, because there's so many, unfortunately, of who we loved from the 80s who are no longer here. And there's so many people I wish I could have interviewed who I'll never get a chance to now.
Yeah, most definitely, man. So when you first started this, did you think it would be as big as what it is now?
No, not at all. I didn't go into it with any big plans. I had a podcast already called Good Journeys, and I'd interviewed a few wrestlers on that. And that kind of led to me thinking, I think I could branch out and create a sister show which is dedicated to wrestling. But I had no idea it would kind of grow as quickly as it's grown. I was very lucky early on to get some really, really good guidance from great people. So Chris Van Vliet helped me out no end in the early days, with kind of looking at how to structure an interview and how to market a podcast. Chris has been a massive supporter of the show since day one, so that helped a lot. And I've just kind of tried to learn as much as I can from people who I think are doing this really, really well, and then trying to carve out my own little corner of the internet. There's so many wrestling podcasts out there. There's so many guys like you and I doing what we're doing right now, that you just have to do what you enjoy. And what I love doing is doing that kind of deep research into someone, and then kind of going through those memories with them, and trying to give them maybe a slightly different interview than they've had before.
Yeah, and that's what I like about your content. You know, I mean, you are different. You can tell that you're a very passionate wrestling fan, and that you're not just some random person that just wants to do this just to talk to like a famous person.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm not in this because I it's not that I don't get a buzz from speaking to wrestlers I loved growing up with, but I don't have that. I don't go into it with that same kind of mindset of, oh, I want to speak to this person or this person. I'm interested in who I think I can get a good interview out. There are people who I love as wrestlers who I actually don't think I would do a very good interview with. I don't think I'd mesh very well with them. So I look at people who I think, looking at what they've done online and seeing the people they are, who I think I would have a good, good chemistry fit with, and it'd be a good conversation.
Yeah. So, who has been your favorite interview that you've done?
It's hard, really, a favorite interview, because they all add so many, so much. What I would say is the one that I was so grateful to do above all of them was Lex Luger, because I never thought I'd get Lex Luger for an interview, and he was amazing. And I've since spoken to Lex a number of times. I worked with him on a foreword for Marc's book. He's just such an amazing, humble, kind, gentle man, and someone I loved as a kid growing up. So that was a really, really cool one. I mean, I think probably the most important interview I ever did was Marc Mero, because that led to us writing a book together. So without him being on the podcast, none of what I'm doing now happens. I've loved them all. I've loved them all. I mean, recording with Demolition again the other day, that's my second time with Demolition, my third time with Barry Darsow. I mean, I grew up as a massive Repo Man fan. So the fact that I can kind of speak with those guys is really cool. How about you? What's been your favorite so far?
So, my favorite one of yours is Lillian Garcia.
I meant of yours, but that's very kind.
Oh, fair enough. So, I like Lillian Garcia that you've done, and it's just we mentioned obviously before we came on. Everything's about timings,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel if anyone's trying to get Lillian Garcia now, it's not going to happen.
I got Lillian a week before she returned to WWE, and she called me up and said, have you still, when are you looking to publish that episode? And I said, oh, it's scheduled for like 2 weeks time. And she was like, can't tell you why, but you need to publish that very quickly. And so that one went out, and yeah, that coincided. I think that went out within a day or two of her returning to WWE. And to see the journey she's been on in the last year has been amazing. I'm just so in awe of how well she's done, and yeah, it's like she's never been away. It really is. I'm sure there's some fans who don't remember her from first time round, but there's so many of us fans that, for me, as I said to her when I interviewed her, like Lillian Garcia is Howard Finkel to me. Really, she is my
Yeah,
ring announcer.
100%.
And so I just think it's amazing that she's got to come home to WWE. And if she's not in the Hall of Fame within the next 2 years, I'll be stunned. I really will.
100%. Because she's one of the longest serving ring announcers going. She was like there in the late 90s, and then she went all the way up until like I think 2014, I think, and then she had like
she had a gap. I think she left in 2011, came back, went away. Then she went to
yeah,
MMA, came back. But probably all told, she's done close to 2 decades, which
100%.
is remarkable. And she's just a lovely, lovely person. And that one came about because I'd already had her on my Good Journey show, and we talked about life away from wrestling. And again, I think a lot of it is about it's time, and it's also what you ask to interview about. As in, I wanted to talk to her about we connected over. I just lost my dad. We connected over losing a parent at a similar time, and the grieving process. That was what started the conversation. All the other stuff follows, but it's very different to kind of getting in touch with someone saying, "Hi, I want to interview you about that segment you did on Raw or that match you had at SummerSlam." A lot of these wrestlers have shared those stories hundreds, if not thousands of times. Like all of us, they want to be asked about the things they really want to talk about. So much of it with guests, I find, is timing. Can you find someone at the exact time that they're promoting things? So, like, for example, I had Karrion Kross on like a few weeks after he left WWE, but that was because his book had just come out, and that one literally fell into my lap. And that's very rare, as you'll know, that interviews fall into your lap. I got contacted and asked, "Do you want to have Karrion Kross on your show?" Let me think. Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. That's rare, but that was great timing. As you know, to get people who are currently with a major promotion onto your podcast is very, very, very difficult. So it's all about catching people at the right time and when they've got availability.
100%. But to answer your question,
yes, about your show.
Yeah, but my favorite two of yours is Lillian Garcia and Kurt Angle.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, and Kurt as another one, like bucket list. I had a list of people that I wanted to interview a few years ago, and Kurt Angle and Lex Luger and Mick Foley were all on that list. And there's only 3 names which I'm still to do, and I'm not sure I ever will. But they were 3 of my dream bucket list guests, and I loved the conversation with Kurt. I hope I could do another one in the future because he was really pushed for time. I got about 35 minutes with him. I'm hoping one day I can do a longer one.
Okay. You mentioned before I answer my question, the other 3. Who's the other 3?
Well, my other 3, this is pure fandom kicking in. So this is my actual 3 favorite wrestlers: Bryan Danielson, Chris Jericho, and Bret Hart. So from a pure fandom point of view, I would love to have the opportunity to have conversations with those 3. Whether that will ever happen, who knows? But equally, there's so many people I've had a chance to speak to in the last 3 years that I never thought I'd get to. That you never know. You can never say never.
Yeah, that's true, man. But my favorite interview that I've done is Jacob Fatu.
Yes, nice.
And
how long ago was that?
That was when I was first starting out.
Amazing.
Well, I'll probably say like 7 months in.
Wow, and look where he is now. It's incredible.
And you mentioned about timings. That was I'm going to swear, fucking perfect timing. Reason being is because I got him, I was speaking to him just after he left MLW. A week later, did it. 6 weeks later, he signs with WWE. So yeah, it's just timings, and
yeah,
I reckon that helped me a lot because when people see that I've had him, and then people see that I've had her, him. Do you know what I mean? When people see the guests that you've had,
yeah,
it helps.
But
You'll
more to
know.
the point, yeah, it does. But I think it also helps you as an interviewer. Like I find, like my confidence grows with each conversation.
Yeah.
When you've had some of these guests on, you're like, well, I can. I don't have the nerves anymore. I still have nerves about it going well because obviously you want it to go well. You're managing the tech side. You want to have a good conversation, but I don't have the nerves anymore about interviewing people. Which is a relief. I still want, before you hit the red button, you're worried, are they going to dial in? Is it going to be okay? Are you going to have a chemistry click? But I don't worry about interviewing people now, which is a relief, and very different to where I was a couple of years ago.
Oh, most definitely, man. And I think it's weird because the podcasting, I'm not going to say industry, but the podcasting community is really weird, I find, because I could try and get a guest. You've seen that I've had that guest. You want that guest, so I put in a word. Some guests charge, some guests don't. It's he knows him, you know her. It's
Yeah.
I think it's all about it's. I found it's all about timings and it's all about connections and who you know. And it's what you know.
Yeah, and as you say, it's a community. Podcasting's amazing. Like everyone helps each other out. I mean, I've referred people on, people have referred on to me, wrestlers have helped me, I've helped wrestlers. It's just one big kind of loop where you're all helping one another. And that's what's, that's wrestling at the end of the day. I mean, that's the entire industry of a wrestling business. You only have to look at like, you know, who are the producers in WWE right now and look at their journeys through like, it's half of TNA are now producing WWE. Like
Mad,
it's
isn't it?
yeah, it's like it's actually a really small business. It seems huge because it's so global and makes so many billions of dollars, but actually wrestling business is really small. And I think that's the other thing. It's all about reputation and it's just about being courteous to people, not being too pushy. I found anyway, and just trying to park the fandom, even if sometimes on the inside you're screaming, I can't believe I'm interviewing so and so. When you're on camera, you've got a job to do, and that job is to give them the best interview possible in the time they've given you.
Yeah, man. So, what would you say the percentage is for? I mean, is this YouTube thing your full time gig now?
No, I've got a full-time job running a PR business. So that's my full-time job is working with charities and not-for-profits in my PR business. Wrestling life has certainly become a quite a sizable chunk of my life now, because I wasn't anticipating that I'd be writing wrestling books. So that's all kind of happened organically. And I guess as the years go on, potentially this becomes more and more of a thing. But I do like the fact that there's a whole other side of my life as well. Because wrestling is my hobby at the end of the day. It's always been the thing I did to escape and to relax. And I wouldn't ever want to be 100% in the world of wrestling, because I like the fact that there is a proportion of my day where I'm doing things which are completely different. And I still like the fact that people sometimes in my normal life discover that I'm a wrestling podcaster and are like, "What? You're into wrestling?" I like the fact that there's two sides, but it's definitely it's taken over far more than I thought it would. Like I've got, 2 more books coming out this year. There's a lot of time going into writing those books and having all the conversations and doing all the research. So it's a lot beyond the podcast now. And then, as you said, I'm trying with the podcast to make Wrestling Life into a platform and into a brand in of itself. So we published Lee Herbert's Rampage book last year. So that was a Wrestling Life book, hoping to create more spaces for independent authors within the wrestling space. Then we've got Hall of Fame, and then we've got this series called Gone Too Soon with my co-host Ash Ajaz, and that's where we do deep dives into wrestlers that we've lost. And so many of those people I wish I could have interviewed. The next best thing is to try and celebrate their lives, and wherever possible, I try and get on a special guest who knew that person, a family member or another wrestler who worked with them, to give that perspective beyond just me as a fan talking about my memories. And sadly, we're never going to run out of people to feature in Gone Too Soon. That is the sad reality of being a wrestling fan. Is there are so many wrestlers that we dearly miss, and so that's a kind of playlist on the YouTube channel that I hope over time grows and grows as more people kind of lean into these long, because I love long form podcasts. That's kind of what I got into. I love during kind of 2018 2019 listening to Bruce Pritchard and listening to all the Comrade shows. I love like listening to 3-hour long deep dives, and so that's kind of what I'm trying to give a bit more, is these quite long detailed episodes where you can go out for a long walk and kind of immerse yourself in a bit of nostalgia.
That's incredible, man. And you mentioned obviously that you've written a few. You got 2 coming out this year. You've already written a few books, but your first one was Marc Mero.
Correct. Yep.
I mean, I've seen the pictures that you've had with Mark and the conversations that you've had with Mark. How did that come about, you writing a book and just having Mark as a guest and stuff like that? Because Mark's an incredible guy.
Mark's an incredible guy. Yeah, having a guest. He was due to tour in 2024, I think it was. He was due to do a UK school tour, which ultimately didn't go ahead. But I saw that online, reached out to a contact of mine, got in touch with him, got him on the show. We had a great conversation, only like 45 minutes, standard kind of podcast conversation. But in that time, I was just so blown away by the person he was and his story. So afterwards, I gave him a call and said, look, this is completely out of the blue, but I think your life story needs to be written in full, including all of the wrestling side of things, which you haven't really told before. And I'd like to be the one to write that with you. And that was it. And a year on, that book exists in the world, and very proud of it. And I think Mark's very proud of it too. Seems to have been well received overall, and just a blessing to to work with Mark on that, because his life story is amazing. And there's a lot of wrestling stuff in there, but there's also a lot, I think, that would surprise people about the person he is and how low he sunk. And he doesn't hold back, even with all the Sable and Brock Lesnar stuff, talking very openly about how that ruined his life and how hard it was to rebuild as a former wrestler. A lot of these wrestlers, we kind of, it's easy to forget, but once the spotlight fades, they go back to being normal people. And that must be really hard when you are used to walking out to 20,000 people cheering from you. And when that stops, I think that silence is pretty deafening. So for Mark, I'm very proud of that book and grateful that he, I've said it to him 101 times, but he opened the doors, because I hadn't ever written a memoir with someone before. And that obviously was the proof that I could do it. And that's led to the 2 books that are coming out this year.
Incredible, man. I mean, for me, I don't. When you're saying, "Oh, you're going to write a book," where would you even start?
So you don't start where I did with Mark's book. I started with the wrestling and I worked backwards, and it made the job twice as difficult. I thought, I know his wrestling career, we'll focus on that and then we'll build the narrative. With the 2 new books, you start at day one. You start when they're born and you work your way chronologically, because it's a lot easier. So with both the new books that I'm working on now with Doug and Mark, I mean, it's lots and lots of calls, lots of research, working your way slowly through their life, and then obviously the chronology of their wrestling careers. And when you do that, trying to look at things that happen in wrestling at the time. So to give an example, when I was speaking with Doug Williams recently about the mid-90s and where he was in Britain at the time, I was also talking to him about what was happening with WWF and WCW and the NWO, and getting his perspective on how the explosion of wrestling in the late 90s impacted British wrestlers and the British scene. So it's not always just about the person's story, but it's about actually wider what was happening in the world and how that affected wrestling. It's a lot of research and a lot of calls, and it turns into therapy sessions, but you get to know the person very, very well that you end up writing with.
That's interesting, that one. I mean, incredible. I mean, you mentioned we're just starting 2026. Where would you want to see yourself in December 2026? So what would you want to achieve, whether that's 100 and odd more thousand on YouTube, or 2 more books, maybe another one in the works, more guests? What do you want to see by the end of this year for Ben Veal with Wrestling with Life?
I'd like the 2 books to be out. I've put, for better or worse, I've already advertised that they're going to be coming in 2026. So I will make that happen. So by the end of this year, for Mark Carney's book and for Doug Williams' book to be out in the world and available, that's my number 1 priority. I mean, as for Wrestling Life, I'm holding it lightly. It's I'm committing to the episodes each week, continuing to look for interesting guests that maybe are people that haven't been interviewed before, haven't been interviewed for a long time. I want to profile more of the indie scene. I want to get more British talent on. Just keep growing episode by episode, I guess. I don't have any big targets in terms of numbers. What's been really encouraging in the last kind of 3 months is I think the show feels like the show is starting to find its audience a bit more, in terms of lots more engagement on social media, much more of a community on Facebook now. So it feels like people are starting to find and discover the show a bit more beyond YouTube. So yeah, just want to keep going. And I don't have any big I haven't got a big bucket list dream guest to go after. I've announced the 8 people for Hall of Fame this year, so they all need to be in. We'll be doing interviews for all of those in the next 3 to 4 months. I'd like to do a couple more in-person interviews if I can, because I did 2 last year, and it's a wonderful experience to do it in person rather than virtual. But holding it all very lightly. I think I think if you make plans, plans break. So I'm trying to be quite chilled about it, really.
Yeah, well, man. So obviously, with you doing family life, writing books, wrestling life, how is your? I'm not saying how's your state of mind, but how's your like? How do you feel? Like how do you cope? Do you get burnt out? Do you get?
Yeah, quite tired. I mean, my big goals for this year is looking after myself much more. So I'm on a nutrition plan at the moment. I'm losing weight. I'm working on my health first and foremost, because I got very, very tired and burnt out last year. I'm switching off a lot more. I have 10 hours a day without my phone, when my phone is put away. So I sleep well now, or that's the plan. I'm watching a lot less wrestling, which probably sounds slightly counterintuitive, but actually a lot of the modern wrestling scene and politics attached with it was actually making me quite angry.
Yeah,
And I thought, rather than get angry about it, let's just remove that from the equation. I think accepting the fact that actually what I really love about wrestling was the 90s and early 2000s. And there's more than enough stories of that going around that I can focus on without having to necessarily be embroiled too much in today's politics. I'm just going slow, really. Anyone who follows me on Instagram will know that I spend most of my mornings in cold coffee shops reading books with my dog on my lap. So I kind of try and have quite a slow pace of country life. And then as you'll know, a lot of these interviews are quite late at night. So you kind of have, it's a bit like being a night worker. Like, a lot of my interviews are like 9 o'clock at night in the UK. Like, I try not to ideally go beyond 10 because I sleep badly, but trying to find some balance, really, because it's a lot. And it is very easy to burn out, and you can never, there'll always be someone else you want to interview. There'll always be another clip you could put out. There'll always be another short you create, whatever. You can't ever have enough, and you just have to be quite, I don't know about you, but I find I just have to be quite regimented with my time,
yeah,
and release episodes into the world and hope they find an audience. And if they don't, you move on to the next one. The great thing about being a YouTuber is, as you say, like with your Jacob Fatu one, someone could discover that in 15 years' time. He'll be headlining WrestleMania 50, and suddenly your interview of him will pop up in YouTube, and it'll be elevated in YouTube
yeah,
because he's really. So what I do love about it is that every conversation you have like this is a little time capsule into where someone was at that time. So yeah,
yeah.
but
That's interesting.
it's a lot. It's tiring podcast, and it's tiring doing this. But it's again, I mean, it's opened my life up. Um, it's opened up so many opportunities, and I feel really, really blessed that I get to speak to these people and have relationships with them, because I've been wrestling has been my life since I was 8 years old. It's been the one thing I've always loved. I've always thought wrestling is the greatest thing in the world, and I don't know about you, but I spent my childhood defending it and my teenage years defending it and having people mocking it. And I've always adored wrestling. So to have a platform to celebrate it is, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, most definitely, man. Are you a fan of AEW?
Yeah. I mean, when AEW launched, absolutely loved it. During the 2020 and 2021 surreal time, I literally, that kept me going watching AEW each week. I have got quite lapsed in watching it, I will admit. Like, I went to All In 2023, and then a month later Wrestling Life launched, and my consumption of current product went down quite significantly when I started doing this podcast. So I
Yeah,
dip in and out of it. Whenever I watch it, I enjoy it. Hopeful that I'll get to go to All In this August, because it was great to be at that first one and I missed the 2024 one. I just think it's great that there's an alternative, and I just want to see more and more alternatives. And I do wonder if the flip side of some of the decisions that TKO has made in the last 2 years will be that actually we see a more vibrant indie scene and more stepping up to the mark, because I think, you know, WWE has gone in such a direction now that a lot more people will probably be looking for an alternative as time goes on. So I think AEW has a massive opportunity to become even bigger, and I wish them every success. I'd love to have more AEW guys on the show at some point. I had Keith Elliott Greenberg on the show last month because he's just written this fantastic book about AEW's first 5 years, and so we were talking about kind of how far they've come as a company. I was at this indie show in Bristol in like December 2018 where Cody Rhodes was there. Were you there?
Yeah. Oh, what's it called?
Fight Forever, and they did like this.
Yeah.
They did like a press conference. And
because what's his name? Were Conrad and Thompson?
Conrad and Bruce were there, and Papa Shango was there. Yeah, and it was just like in this big leisure centre in Bristol. And he kind of, I remember they did this like press conference at the end of the night, and he was like, "Oh, there'll be something coming very soon." And then, you know, 3 weeks later, they announced.
Yeah, AEW. I was there. That's mad.
That's awesome. Yeah, it was really cool, and I still go back to that because I went to WrestleMania 40, and I'm there like hundreds and hundreds of feet away, seeing this tiny Cody Rhodes, you know, becoming the biggest star in wrestling, and just thinking, wow, like only like 5 years earlier, you were in like a leisure centre in Bristol. And that's what I mean again, like that's what I mean again. Wrestling is really, really small, and you know, who would have predicted that, like, you know, the biggest names in WWE now are, if you'd said 10 years ago that CM Punk, Drew McIntyre, and Cody Rhodes would be the biggest names in WWE, you'd have laughed, because in 2016, you know, in 2016, none of those were even in the company. And so it's a really cool industry, wrestling, because the more it changes, the more it stays the same in many regards.
Yeah. So to finish off the episode, man, I like to be inspirational because the world can be a bit negative sometimes.
Yep.
What's an inspirational message from Ben?
Oh gosh, you're asking me this on a dreary January afternoon. My inspirational message would probably be from my own experience. If you have a passion and a love for doing something, then just start doing it. Because I didn't have all this stuff 3 years ago, and I had a lot of self-doubt and worry that I could pull it off, and I just launched myself into it. And I've thrown everything into it for 3 years, and it's produced some really cool stuff. So if you love something, whether that's wrestling or something else, I imagine if you're 30 minutes into listening to us talk, but it's wrestling, just go for it, and be genuine. That would probably be my number one bit of January advice. Yeah.
Where can people find you, Ben?
I've kept it nice and simple. So all the social medias are at Wrestling Life Online, all one word. So that's YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. And then the website is wrestlinglife.online. And there you can find Marc Mero's book. You can find Lee Herbert's Rampage book. And you can find the Hall of Fame as well, and all the episodes of the show. There's next week's the 90th episode of Wrestling Life. So There's a fair few to wade through if you want to go back, including the very first episode, which was Nathan Cruz, who's now part of AEW. So again, like, pretty cool to see how people's journeys all come, you know, where they're meant to go in the end.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thank you for coming on. I really do appreciate your time.
Thank you.
As I know you're very busy man.
What you do in 2026.
Oh yeah, definitely, man. I'll definitely have you on later in the year.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming on, mate. Take care.
Cheers, Jordan.